A broad definition of literacy is the ability to communicate using any type of visual representation.
Literacy is more than just reading and writing. It is embedded in social, cultural and subject-specific factors. Literacy practices change depending on the context.
For example, today, the word woke communicates a different meaning depending on the context and the social situation. Literacy entails not only knowing how to read the word woke but to also know if it is implying the past tense of waking up or the act of being socially aware.
This definition of literacy does not restrict literacy as the ability to simply follow a set of rules in order to read and write. It takes into account that literacy is dynamic because language itself is always changing depending on the contexts. Recognizes that literacy is influenced by social factors and our social surrounding.
What exactly is biliteracy? It is the development of reading, writing and speaking in two linguistic systems. It is much more complex and dynamic than monoliteracy. It develops in two different but interconnected contexts. Biliteracy is making meaning through the interaction of two linguistic systems as well as cultures, which develop and evolve over time, exposure and need. For example, if a student's L1 is French and their L2 is English, they may develop their French and English writing skills at the same time. That is, if the teacher encourages both writing systems in the classroom. The student may also use their writing skills in French to help them write in English. Consequently, the English writing system may also affect their French writing. They can also develop their own hybrid writing system of a combination French and English that they use with their friends.
Now, this definition of biliteracy encourages two linguistic systems to interact and make connections. It promotes the fluency of both languages. Finally, it encourages the connection between two cultures.
Pluriliteracy is several linguistic practices, values and cultures interacting with one another to form a system that is flexible and dynamic.
For example, one form of pluriliteracy would be to have students create a PowerPoint presentation using pictures and words about a specific topic, such as the cells of the human body. In this case, many integrated literacies come into play. And in order to properly understand the information being presented, one must be able to understand all of these literacies. For example, understanding that the PowerPoint represents compacted information. Understanding that the larger statements or words in the PowerPoint are titles. And that the numbers at the bottom of the slide indicate page numbers. One must also understand that the pictures in the PowerPoint represent a message. One needs to also have knowledge of the English language, if the project is in English. And one needs to know the language specific to science and biology. In the end, all of these literacies are all coming together to convey a specific meaning.
This definition of pluriliteracy moves beyond simply two linguistic systems. It takes into account several languages and gives equal importance to all the varying types of languages, dialects and registers. It also recognizes the value of social contexts and how one can use different types of literacy to convey meaning across contexts. It includes multimodality, hence not only print writing but also other channels of communication. Pluriliteracy also encourages students to convey subject-related concepts for a specific purpose, using appropriate language representation and appropriate modes of communication. Lastly, it allows for deeper connections between the concepts and the communication of these concepts.
My first encounter with literacy was a toy I used to have. It had the entire English alphabet. And it had a picture of a word that started with that letter. The toy also had the word spelled out underneath the picture. You would be able to press the letter to hear what the letter was and also hear the word being pronounced. It was my favorite toy and I played with it so much that I still remember all the words to this day. Playing with that toy was the first time I actually learned to make a connection with the physical world around me and the printed words surrounding me. It was also when I realized that there were other things around me that began with the same letters that were in my toy. Before I even started formal schooling, my parents sent me to Quran classes. There, I learned how to read Arabic. I began by learning each letter, and then the diacritical marks that came on top of the letters. After that, I learned the sounds that a group of letters would make, and then I moved on to actual words. Finally, I learned how to read entire sentences without stopping for a breath. Arabic was reserved for a religious context. If I wanted to read the Quran or if I wanted to read a special prayer, I would read them in Arabic. Reading in Arabic just gave me a stronger spiritual connection compared to if I was reading the same thing in English. I started kindergarten in French, and that was where I practiced communicating in pictures. I was learning the alphabet, but when I wanted to convey a message I did it through my drawings. Since I did not know how to write yet, I learned that I could draw what I wanted to communicate. Drawing allowed me to only illustrate objects but also express actions and emotions. When I started grade 1, I got more exposure to writing and reading. I was a quick learner because due to my experience with Arabic literacy, I already understood the concept of reading, and how different letters make different sounds and how a group of letters make words to form a sentence. Proper instruction in English literacy began in grade 3. At this time, I continued developing my literacy in French, and even if the two linguistic systems were never mixed. Because reading and writing in English is very similar to French, it was easier to develop my English literacy skills. The languages themselves are different, but I knew I had to modify my language depending on the contexts. For example, there were certain words or tenses you needed to use if you wanted to convey politeness. And written language differed depending on the subject and content. Or that a story was not written in the same format as an informative text. The format of the text immediately helped me make meaning. A story was an event that may not actually have happened, whereas an informative text was giving me factual information. As technology has advanced, so has my digital literacy. The internet has its own culture, and it is constantly evolving and changing. Informal communication through the internet is very different compared to formal communication. There are specific pictures, such as memes, that convey a very specific meaning. Punctuation and grammar have their own set of rules. Knowing how to read and write is not always enough to understand digital literacy. For example, if I am chatting with my friends, then having to type and explain exactly how I am feeling does not always seem appropriate. Instead, I would choose to send a meme that conveys those exact emotions. Painting is also a form of literacy I have developed and that I continue to practice. There are no words, but the subject of my painting and the colors are forms of expression. They allow me to express my feelings and mood. And not everyone will be able to understand the exact message of my painting, but that is okay because the message is for me and I am literate in this type of literacy.